Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Between Two Brokers. Today we have Angie Hranowsky. I hope I said it right.
You did.
Who's an interior designer. I guess that's what you call yourself.
Mm-hmm. Decorator, designer.
Decorator.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Angie and I have a mutual friend and client, Melanie Birch, and I've seen Angie's work in person, and it's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
So I really wanted to have her on the show because her work is unlike anything that I've seen. And Melanie speaks so highly of you, and you have a successful business and a cool house, and we just want to hear about all the things. So first, I want to hear about how you wound up getting into the design business.
So I've always been creative, but I look back now and like the signs were all there. Like when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Barbie. But I never played like Barbie Cann. My grandmother would make all my Barbie clothes. I was very into fashion. And she would also make little bedspreads and bolster pillows. And I would take my mom's record albums and set up, and I would put them together and make houses. And I would tape and I would make drapes. And so basically I was designing their houses or putting their clothes on. That's like all I would do. And then when I was in college, I was always doing my apartments, and people would comment on them. And I was like, I don't know, I just do it with whatever I could find. So I was always like, as soon as I would move into an apartment, I traveled a lot and sort of moved around and was out west and lived in, Miami and all over. And every time I would get an apartment, I would immediately paint it and just decorate it. And I had even like family members. My aunt would be like, oh, you should do my house. And I thought, oh, it's not really what I do. I just, So anyway, I was an art history major in college. And then, 3 or 4 years after college, I decided to go back to school, and so I moved to Atlanta and went to Portfolio Center to be a graphic designer. And I loved it. It was 2 of the best years of my life. It was amazing. And I learned so much, even just about design in general and architecture. We really had to study a lot. We had to build a chair. It was a really cool program, and I still have a lot of good friends from that time. And then I took a job in Miami as a graphic designer, which was really cool. So we lived there for about 3 years. We weren't married at the time, but my ex-husband, we were together, and so we moved down there, and we were there for about 3 years. Did that apartment too. And then, so let me back up. We had moved here for a really short period of time in 1995. I had met him after college. I moved to the Outer Banks for a little while with a bunch of friends. Met my now ex-husband. He was from Richmond, and we were there for a couple summers, and it was like, where do we go next? And his brother had gone to the Citadel. I didn't know the difference between Charlottesville and Charleston. I didn't know anything. I was from Louisville, Kentucky. We went to the Panhandle of Florida. I'd been out west, but I didn't really know that much about this part of the country. And so we just hopped in his Jeep one day and we drove down here in 1995. And I was like, oh, wow, we need to live here. So we immediately moved here, and we had this really cute little apartment on Pitt Street, this carriage house. And then when we were here, it was really just right at a year is when I decided I wanted to go back to school. So we moved to Atlanta. And we really loved Charleston, but I didn't want to immediately come here after school. I wanted to live in a bigger city. And I love the coast, and so did he, surfs. And so we moved down to Miami. And then when we decided to move back here, we got married, came back here in November of 2000. And had an apartment for not very long, 3 or 4 months, and then we bought a house, and that's when the light bulb went off. And I was doing that house, and it was super tight budget, and we were renovating it and gutting the kitchen, and I was decorating and on this shoestring budget. And I remember one day looking at my mom, and I said, I could do this. If I had clients and a budget, I think I even said I could be in a magazine. Not that was my goal, but the goal was, how do I make this happen? How do I get my work out there so people can see it and I could get clients? So that was when the light bulb went off, and I thought, oh, I'm in the wrong business. I like being a graphic designer, but I love doing this. This is what I was put on the planet to do. So then it was, how do I make this happen? So we'd been in the house for a little while, had a baby, and one of my best friends, who's my photographer, she shoots all my work, we were already working together. She was a commercial photographer. I was a graphic designer. We were both freelancing and put together on projects, and so we became really good friends. And she came to me one day and she said, we need to shoot your house. We need to photograph it. There was already a little buzz kind of going around about it. And so we photographed it, and initially it was like, oh, you can send it to Charleston Magazine. And I was like, if we're photographing it, I'm sending it to everyone. So this was, I don't know, like 2004 maybe. And I was a graphic designer, so I knew about branding, and I knew how to pitch myself. So I put together this beautiful little book of my house and got this beautiful Italian paper, and I had it letterpressed, and I called my seamstress, and I had her like stitch all the pages together, and a friend of mine was a copywriter, so I had her write the thing. And this was before, you didn't email anything back then. This was 2004, so everything went in the mail. And then my friend Julia Lynn, who's the photographer, said, you should FedEx it, because they're getting so many submissions, like so many people are sending that you want them to open it. So I FedExed everything. So I basically went through all of my favorite magazines, which back then there were a lot more shelter magazines, but Metropolitan Home, Architectural Digest was not a thing for me back then. I didn't like the way they photographed, and it wasn't really my magazine. But Elle Decor, Metropolitan Home, Domino had just hit the stands, the original Domino.
I loved that.
Yes, and so I had my best friend that I grew up with lives in New York City, and I remember one day she texted me at the same time, and it was the side of a Subway thing, and it had the Domino, and she was like, this is, like, you should totally be in this magazine. So I got all of my favorite magazines, and I sent I picked two editors, because I didn't know. I just was like, I need somebody to see this. So I picked two editors from all of my favorite magazines, and then one editor from the magazines that I wasn't, quite as crazy about, but I would take like whatever, and FedExed them this thing. And within, I don't know, 3 or 4 days, I got a call from immediately from Metropolitan Home, which it folded in 2008 after the recession. But it was a great magazine at the time. And so they called and they said, we have this special issue that we do once a year. You didn't really submit for it, but we think you would be perfect for it. It wouldn't be the whole house. We would photograph like 3 rooms. I think it was like the bedroom, the living room, and it wasn't a very big house. And of course I said yes. And I was like, oh my God, yes, And so I had to, sign a contract, and they sent a photographer pretty quickly, I don't know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks or something. Well, then I do that. It hasn't come out in the magazine yet, but I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 weeks after I sent these books out to everybody. I got a call within like 3 hours of each other from Sarah Ruff and Costello at Domino and Doretta Sperduto at House Beautiful, both wanting to do a full story on the house. On the same day they called, and I was like, and that's when, I knew when Met Home called, and then I thought, okay, I'm doing this. Like, this is going to work. And so, but I didn't know, but I knew enough to know that another magazine wasn't going to publish my house if somebody else was already publishing it. But I wanted the other two because they wanted the full story, and Met Home was not a full story. But I was like, I can't burn any bridges. Like, I can't call up a magazine now and like pull it. Like, you just can't do that in that world. So I called Doretta at House Beautiful and told her, and she said, yeah, we can't do it. And she said, but you're on our radar, and we would love to see what you do next. And so then Sarah and Costello and I played phone tag for like a month, and I was hugely pregnant with my second child. So we finally get on the phone, and I told her I was pregnant first. She goes, oh my God, that's even better. That's just fat. That's like so good. And I was like, no, but. And so then I told her about the Met Home, and then she goes, oh, yeah, we can't do it. And so then like a couple weeks later, she called me back, and she said, we really want to feature you in something, but we can't do your house. So would you do your 10 favorite things? So on the last page of the original Domino was always a 10 favorite things, and they would have somebody on there. This is back in the day. This is Condé Nast. They spent so much money on magazines back then. Just for a one page of like my picture with like my 10 favorite things around it, they sent a whole crew to Charleston. I had a makeup artist. They sent, an editor, a photographer, an assistant. Just for this one, that would never happen now.
Yeah.
Now they'd be like, can you take a picture and like send it to us? And, like, so I did that. So that was really great. And then, and then around that time, I thought maybe I should go back to school for interior design. So I drove down to SCAD one day and met with them. And I think this was actually right before all this, right before I got pregnant. And then I just thought, I have like a baby, and I have a full-time freelance graphic design business. I cannot be driving to Savannah back and forth to go to school. It's just not going to work. So then I started looking around, and I found this, I think it was like a 5-week class at Parsons in New York City. It wasn't like, you were going to get a degree in interior design. I was just craving it so much. I was reading anything I could get my hands on. I was researching. And my best friend lives in New York, and so I went up and lived with her. And Lulu, my daughter, was, I don't know, barely 2. And Meg's husband was like, she isn't going to know you're gone. Like, just do it, So they would come up on weekends, and my mom and my aunt would come up, and it was just the best. And so I lived with my friend Allison for 5 weeks and took this class at Parsons, which was amazing. They taught me how to draw to scale and how to calculate stairs and so it was really great. So I did all of that within like a couple of years, and then my house got featured, and then my son was born. So this is like 2006, and around that time, my mom had been wanting, I'm an only child, so my mom had been wanting to move here, and so she finally moved here, and when she did, this was all starting to take off. And so she said, look, I've got a budget, but I'm just going to give it to you. You can do whatever you want in my house. And so I did, and House Beautiful picked it up, like, before the dining room was even done.
Wow.
Doretta called me and said, can you send me pictures? And
Where
I did.
was the house?
It's still here. She still lives here. It's in Moreland over in West Ashley. It's just like a little, like, bricked cottage house right across the bridge. And so they picked it up right away, shot it. That was really quick. It doesn't usually, you have to be willing to play the long game with magazines, which a lot of young people I think don't want to do, but it's a lot of hurry up and wait. It takes a lot of time to get everything together. You have to scout it. Sometimes they get back to you quickly, sometimes they don't, then you have to go to the next one, That was the other thing I learned in the beginning when I sent out those little books was you don't send it to everybody at the same time. You start off with your first choice first, because I got screwed because I would have preferred these other ones, but I had sent it to everybody.
Right.
So I learned that. So anyway, so my mom's house got picked up, and then it was just a matter of, for a while, I was still doing, so I started slowly getting clients. I was still a graphic designer. So for a little while, it was like 40-60 and then 50-50. But really, I wanted to be an interior designer. And I didn't tell everybody that because I needed my graphic design business. So I would just be like, oh, I love doing both. But really, I was like, I just want to be an interior designer. And then right before the crash in 2008, like a couple weeks, like maybe really quickly before that, 2-3 weeks before that, I got a call from Lindsay Bierman, who was the editor-in-chief of Cottage Living, which does not exist anymore. And he had called and said, we're going to be doing this Cottage Living idea home, and we want you to be the designer, and it was going to be up at Mixon. So Mixon was developed by the Ion Group, and they only had a few houses. Well, they were going to bring in, what's that development company from Atlanta? It'll come to me. But anyway, they were involved, and they were going to start building more houses at Mixon. And so it was going to be one of those houses. And I was like, sure, great, we'll do it. I'll do it. And then, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks after that, we went to Italy for my mom's 60th birthday, and we had a great time, and my kids, and we brought my friend Susan, who was my nanny, and my mom and my aunt came, and my aunt had to fly home a day before us. And she called, and she said, you don't want to come home. It's bad. Like, the market had totally crashed. And so I got home, and I lost every single graphic design client that I had overnight because I did mostly print, and there was no budget. There was no more money. So they all went away. My interior design clients that I had went away like temporarily, and then they kind of started. But I didn't have the scale of clients that I do now, so they were kind of small. But they went away and then came back. And then the Cottage Living house was still on for a little bit, and then the day we were supposed to have this groundbreaking thing, which I think was in like 2 months later, like in October, the magazine folded. And so we were like, okay, well, I guess that's not going to happen. And then, I don't know, like a month went by, and I got a call, and they said, okay, look, this is what's happening. They folded Cottage Living, but they've let go of the editor-in-chief at Coastal Living, and they're bringing Lindsay Bierman from Cottage Living over to Coastal Living, and now it's going to be the Coastal Living idea home. But Mixon's out. The investors had all pulled out, so we have to find a different builder in a different neighborhood. It ended up being such a better project because I wasn't crazy about the house I was going to have to do at Mixon. We ended up doing a house in Ion. Structures was the builder because builders were just building spec houses. Well, builders didn't have any money to build spec houses anymore. And so all of a sudden this magazine comes in.
Oh my gosh, I know the house, the white stucco one that was on the lake. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I will never forget when I went into that house the first time.
Yeah. It was the best.
Oh.
Like, it was so amazing. So that was like, I don't know, like November, December. We were supposed to break ground at Mixon in October. So this is all happening around Christmas, like the holidays. Structures comes on board. I think we finally got started in like January, but we still had the same deadline, which was like June. I mean, that is insane. So it was the best. And that was the first time I ever had a project where I got to design everything from top to bottom. I was picking out the moldings. I was like, okay, I want to do these bookshelves. And Steve's like, that's not in the budget. And I was like, I want to do this Anstax tile. And he's like, that's not in the budget. I mean, and basically I just had to work it. He was like, look, if you want to do this whole wall of Anstax tile, then you have to go out and find all the other tile for the bathrooms for free. And I was like, I'll do it. So, and I had to go to Birmingham and like present, and then I had to present to Steve and like other realtors. It was just, but we all got along so well, and it was the best project. And so then what happens is when it's finished, they have a big party a few months after it's done. But when it's immediately finished, which was like June, the team from Coastal Living comes and they bring up a photographer, and she was amazing, Tria Giovanni. And the editors, and they come down and they photograph it. Well, they show up, and Steve and I, we've got it styled. I mean, I've got the books out, like everything is ready. And they showed up, and all the editors were like, it's done. And we were like, yeah. And they were like, no, this never happens. And so we went out to dinner, and all we heard were horror stories. They were like, we show up, and the floors aren't in, and the bathroom's not done. And they were like, literally, this is the first time we've ever shown up, and the house was finished. And Steve and I were like, well, you gave us our job.
This is what we do.
Yeah, we do. So really, the recession, that whole thing that happened in 2008 was really what made my interior design career take off, because I just didn't do. I had one graphic design client after that for a little while, and it was really hard to do it because it's a totally different job from when you're a graphic designer. You're sitting at your desk all day. As an interior designer, I was kind of all over the place, and I was working from home, and that didn't last for very long. And I needed a studio, and so I finally got a studio downtown in 2010, and then it just kind of.
So I would say you're like really known for bold colors and bold patterns. So much so that I wanted to meet you at the door with a blindfold and make you do this whole thing blindfolded because my house is so muted. I was like, just gonna hate it in here.
It was beautiful. I haven't been back this far in so long.
What is this? Because I just designed a mountain house, and I'm like so scared about like bold colors and what is your secret to pairing these really loud colors and textures and patterns?
I mean, I honestly don't know that I have a secret. It's just sort of intuitive. I mean, like I said, I didn't go to school. I mean, going to school for graphic design was amazing. That really taught me about, even in doing interior design, about balance and juxtaposition. And we studied architecture and all sorts of things. But when it comes to color and texture, it's really this intuitive process that I have. And for me, it's usually just about balance. And I intuitively know what colors look like, how they work together, like all the way down to like the shade of that red is off just a hair. And I need to find one that's got a little more yellow undertone or, blue undertone. Or
have you ever put something up like all in and you're like, well, shit, that didn't work.
Not like that. No. I mean, there's been times we just did this amazing historic house in Ohio, of all places, in Hudson, Ohio, which is just south of Cleveland. And it's just, I love this client so much, and the house is amazing. And we did it all. We walked in, we're installing, they're out of town, and we're putting everything in. And the sitting room, the house is 1826, and then there was an addition that was added on the back. So in the historic part of the house, my whole team is there and we're installing it. And I kept walking in the sitting room and I was like, something is bothering me. Like something's not right. Everybody else flew back and I stayed for another 4 days. I was like styling at the end by myself. And then the client came in and we had some stuff to do and hang art and all of that. And I was in there by myself and I walked in and I'm like, oh, it's the table. I just like pulled this table away from the end of the settee. And I was like, that's what it is. And I found this other little drinks table that we had and I put that there. And I was like, oh, that's so much better. I mean, it was an expensive. I couldn't charge her for the table. I mean, she'd already paid for it. I had to give her the money back. I couldn't let her and it was an expensive table. So stuff like that will happen every once in a while. It's definitely an expensive business to make a mistake in. But I've never done a whole space and walked in and been like, ugh.
Yeah. Well, I want, while people are listening, I want you to pull up 7 Sale Road, which is currently listed, and you'll find it in Zillow. It's 7 Sayle Road in Charleston, so that you can see like that green lacquered library
with the ceiling.
Oh
too.
my God.
Yeah. But one thing I noticed with those photos is that it doesn't feel like that at all inside that house. I don't know. I don't know if you looked at the pictures. It always is
different.
It is.
Photos. You can't really ever completely capture.
Well, the colors actually look so much brighter in the photos, and just having been at the house, maybe because it's nighttime and just
I was
parties.
Say it depends on the time of day. It gets really good light depending on what time of day you're in there.
Yeah, but I mean, the house it's the most fun party house, and so we know the story of the house. I don't think I know far back beyond when Melanie purchased it. But when I was asking Melanie about you, she just said that your process is what is probably the most interesting thing, because somebody comes to you and they say, okay, here's my house, here's my budget. And then what else do they give you? What other questions do you have to ask? And then what happens?
And sometimes they don't always come to us with a budget either. Sometimes we create a budget for them.
I can't wait to get there in life.
I know. I mean, really, it does seem crazy sometimes that you have a client that doesn't really have a budget, and which is great. I mean, that doesn't happen a lot where we're just like a free-for-all with, whatever we want. But usually it's more like they don't necessarily have a budget, but they want us to help them put together one, even if it's a lot, even if it's a big budget. So with Melanie's, they did have a budget, and it was a good budget. So, but I mean, I think that, again, it's, you ask them, how do they live? Did they have young kids? Did they have grown kids? Did they have pets? Did they entertain a lot? Did they not entertain a lot? Are they big TV watchers and they lounge around all the time? Did they travel all the time? Like Melanie and Peter travel a lot. What are their, is there anything that inspires them? Are there colors that they really like and don't like? I've heard this thing that I've heard this before where they'll say, oh, if you're an interior designer, just go into your client's closet and see what the color of their clothes are, and then you'll know. I mean, I guess that could be true. However, my entire closet is denim, black, white.
Me too.
And I used to wear a lot of color, and I think for me, the reason I don't is because my work is so colorful and my house is colorful. Like, I guess I don't think that was a conscious choice. At some point, but I've always kind of been like, I love like 70s, like I love vintage Levi's and leather jackets, and I've always kind of been like that. But I did used to wear more color, so I don't know that I would know if that was totally for sure. I mean, I have another client who pretty much only wears black and white, and she discovered me, and I went over when they first started building the house, and she asked me some questions, and it wasn't until like a year later that she called me and said, okay, the house is built and I need you to come in, and all I have is like a sofa. Like, I need you to come in and do it. And so we started working together, and a few weeks after we started working together, she said, the reason I didn't hire you right off the bat was because you use a lot of color, and that scares me. And I was like, but we don't have to go in and like paint all the walls, and it can just be in the artwork and the fabrics and so her house is mostly white with colors in other areas, and it was beautiful, and she loves it. Now we're on like our third, project together. But so ask all the questions, how did they live? What things do they like and not like? And then from there, again, it's just sort of this intuitive sort of gut feeling that you have. And also you have to take in the architecture of the house and its location and, all of those things. And I do a lot of research. But as I'm researching and taking in all of that information, it just, at some point it starts to fall together, and I just know
what are you researching?
What the direction is. Oh my God, I'll look at architecture books. I'll look at magazines. I might find a piece of artwork or color, anything. I'm just like really diving into a lot of imagery and books and all sorts of stuff and it might not be like, oh, I want to do that room. It's more like something sets off some sort of an inspiration for me. I might see like a finish on a wall and be like, oh my God, that's what I need to do, something like that in this space.
Do you have a preference between clients who want to be very involved and ones that are like, just call me when it's done? Free for all.
I mean, are you kidding, Erin? Is that a real question?
Well, it is a real question.
Why don't you call me and I'll pick out the house for you? Okay, give me your. Let's like.
No.
But I have heard interior designers that have that story. I have not had that, but I will say that's a good question.
When I have clients, I like buyers that have a very specific want.
Yeah.
Because when it's too big, I mean, when they're like, oh, we'll live anywhere, it's like, well, fuck, that makes my job really hard.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes it is nice to have some constraints or a budget. I think it was like Suzanne Kassler, a designer, said, I was reading what she had said one time. She's like, sometimes I'll say to clients, just pick up a Restoration Hardware catalog and pick out a sofa, 3 chairs, 2 side tables, 2 lamps, a rug, and add that up.
Yeah.
And that's just a catalog.
Right.
And and then you take that and you turn it into a really beautiful custom room that you've hired a designer to do, and you can see how quickly the money. And I also don't just stop at like, drapes and chairs and rugs. I do the complete, sometimes my clients, Melanie had artwork. Sometimes my clients have artwork. Sometimes they have art advisors, and then they'll still get my opinion on it. Sometimes I have clients who don't have a lot of art, or they have second homes, and so we need to find art. But I'm doing the finished, all the way down to styling the coffee table and the bookshelves, and what are the accessories and the sculptures and the books, and like.
I've noticed your books are a
books.
big piece of your design. Yeah, coffee table books and
all
decorative.
Books.
Yes.
I have a lot of books in most bookshelves.
Yeah.
I've had some clients that are like, "Oh, we throw our books away." I'm like, "Well, we're about to get some more because I'm sort of obsessed. I have too many books. Well, you can't have too many books. I have a lot of books.
No, I agree.
But
with you.
also that comes from. I'm a curious person, and I like to read and I like to research, but I also used to be a graphic designer, so I love books themselves. So I have books that are in Spanish that I got when I was in Spain or Mexico City that I just love the way they're designed, and I'll buy them. So yeah, I do love a lot of books. But yeah, it's a lot. It's an investment for sure. But I also feel like, there is kind of this percentage thing you can do. If you're going to spend this much on the house, you can expect to spend, this much on the decorating. So.
Would you say that there's like a top 3 things that you take into consideration when designing common spaces?
You mean like a living room, family room,
kitchen,
like open, like.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that they're comfortable and I like, and sometimes you end up with spaces that are a little bit more formal, but I try to make spaces inviting, and so that they don't always just feel like a room that nobody's ever going to go into. Sometimes that inevitably happens if you have a big house with a lot of rooms. But
I feel like that's common in like downtown Charleston homes.
It's
is.
Like,
that's a sitting room. We don't go in there.
It is.
It's just for show.
It is. And that we just did an old an 18th century house downtown, and I think they actually are going to use that room a lot. But and then the house that we did in Ohio that I was just talking about has a sitting room and a dining room that's part of the the old house. And my guess is they entertain a lot, so it will get used. But when they're entertaining, I doubt if they also have a really super cozy family room. So yeah, for common spaces, I think you want it to be inviting, you want it to be cozy, you want it to be able to wear well. Most of our clients have pets / animals, so we try to be conscious about that. And that really just gets down to what are the contents of the fabric. How many rubs, you can look on the back to see how many rubs and how it's going to wear. But also there's some content to some fabrics that we try to stay away from, just in terms of being able to clean them. And then we try to get Fiber Seal or an equivalent, if it's another city, to come in and treat everything. Because, I'll say to people, like, unless you want to cover your entire house in ultra suede and plastic, I can't guarantee you that nothing's going to happen. You just have to live your life. But if we treat everything and you continue to have it treated and then give you like a little kit to get stuff out. So we had I have some clients down in Florida, and we did this house in Ponte Vedra Beach a few years ago. We had this beautiful wool rug from Stark, and they treated it before they sent it. And at the time, her son, Jack, was like 2 years old, and she called and she said, "Oh my God, Matt had a glass of red wine on the coffee table, and Jack spilled it off, and it landed on the rug." Totally came out because it had been treated beforehand. So we try to have everything treated as much as possible. But I want spaces to be cozy. I want them to be really interesting and beautiful, and I want them to speak to the people that live there, but you also want them to be, inviting and relaxing and, casual and cozy. And
do you only do whole houses?
For the most part. Now, we will take, if it's most of a house, sometimes we'll do it. If it's a project that might be in like 2 phases, and I'll go ahead and design the whole house, and then they can implement, part of it now and part of it, whenever. But for the most part, it's a whole house, or most of the house. Sometimes it's like what is that saying about the stepchildren? The guest bedrooms sometimes get a little less love. Or if there's a lot of guest bedrooms, you spend more money on like 1 or 2 and not as much. But for the most part.
And when you say we, who are you talking about? Who's we?
Oh, did I say we would like designing?
What we do. Yeah.
Oh, I guess
take
my studio. Yeah. I mean, I do all the designing, but I have two amazing girls that women that work with me, Jane and Lily, and an operations manager and a project manager. And I'm so lucky.
So how much of your work is local and how much of it is outside of Charleston?
I would say, probably not 50-50, maybe like 60-40 or 70-30. I mean, I think most of it is still in Charleston, but we definitely have a few projects in Florida. I've done an apartment in New York, did a house in Austin, this house that we just did in Ohio. And then some clients, we did this really great house over the last couple of years here downtown, and they're New Yorkers, and they also have a house in Connecticut. So now I'm getting ready to help them with their house in Connecticut.
Is there anything that you consider like being a big risk in interior design? Like if someone comes to you and they're like, I really love, I don't know, polka dots or something. You're like, that's risky. Because I think you're so good at like making the bold things work.
I don't know about risky. I mean, things probably that are too trendy. I don't really have clients that come to me with anything that I'm like, oof. I just try to stay away from things that are super trendy. I'm not big on trends. I feel like if you're in the interior design world, nobody wants to hear 18 months after they did their kitchen that cost them $90,000 that it was too trendy.
Yeah.
That's just not, and that's all just social media and marketing and having to get stuff out there all the time. This isn't the fashion world, you need to do homes that people can love for a long time. And I don't want them to be super like traditional. So I kind of walk a line between, I want them to be interesting and different, a little modern, but maybe a little traditional. I sort of just do a mix. I like houses to look like they weren't just done overnight or one-stop shopping. I want them to represent the people who live there, but also to be interesting and look like, you've carried stuff with you or you've traveled. And sometimes that is part of the story, and sometimes you make it seem like that's part of the story.
Oh, you can tell there's effort in your designs. I mean, that it's unbelievable.
Yeah, thank you.
I did post on Instagram that we were interviewing you today, and did anyone have any questions? And by and large, most people responded, and they were like, "Oh my God, Angie? She's the best. I'm obsessed with her work." And so got lots of compliments.
Thank you.
I did get a couple questions. The first one was, what are some simple things that all homeowners can do to make their house feel more luxurious?
I mean, off the top of my head, to feel more, luxurious is a hard, I don't know about luxurious, but fine fabrics. I mean, if you wanted to throw in some pillows or have really nice bed linens, press them if you can, I think those, if you want to talk luxurious, I think in terms of making a house feel welcoming and comfortable, and sometimes it's just about layout and furniture plan, which I know most people probably need help with. I think when you're a designer, you can usually walk into a room and sometimes say like, oh, if you just put this over here and you move this over here, and it's really going to open the space, or you need to bring like all the chairs are way out here, you need to bring them in and make everything feel more intimate and inviting. But in terms of luxurious, I think it would be to maybe style things so that the space feels more open, and bring in some really beautiful fabrics to recover chairs or pillows or really fine sheets. I mean,
yeah. So when you said press, you meant that I have to iron my sheets to feel rich.
Yes.
Well, fuck.
You don't. But if she wants luxurious, I'm just trying to tell you these are the things that that's luxurious is a word of like
Oh yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Another one was, are there any local stores that you love for just like decorative accessories?
Yes. Antiques of South Windermere.
Okay.
That's been my go-to for 20 years since I've
That's
been here.
awesome.
17 South, which they also own, which is right down the street. They're both in West Ashley. I go into Winsome sometimes, downtown, Fritz Porter. John Pope is an antique dealer, and he's amazing. He used to have a little place on King Street.
I remember that.
He doesn't anymore, but he sells, he has stuff at Antiques of South Windermere and 17 South. And he's a friend of mine. He's amazing. I mean, he's like my go-to. He used to have stuff at Fritz Porter, but So usually when I'm going into those places, I'm like on my way to see what John's got. And I also call him sometimes. Like, hey, I need like a really cool chair for this, foyer or something. Trying to think of what else. Oh, Joanna White, who has the White Gallery.
Yeah.
Now she's got, what's it called? It's over in West Ashley. Warehouse 61, I think. She's got a whole huge space full of vintage furniture, and I've been there a few times. I think I got a little table from her one time. But I've gotten other stuff from her when she was in Mount Pleasant, that location in Mount Pleasant. I actually have a couple pieces of artwork.
So how much of the furniture in a space generally, is new versus vintage or older?
I don't know. I think if you asked me that 10 years ago, I would say it was mostly vintage. But now I think it's probably, I'm sitting here trying to go through houses in my head.
I assume you're always getting new sofas.
Typically.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll get vintage sofas and recover them, but ideally we do custom sofas because that's when you really get the size and shape that you want. And we have an amazing custom upholsterer in New York, and those babies are going to last forever. I don't know, maybe 50-50 or maybe 40% new and 60% antiques and vintage.
Yep.
Just depends. I don't do a ton of furniture from like showrooms, like at ADAC, stuff like that. I mean, some I do. So usually if it's new, sometimes it's a little catalog thing or something, Yeah, I don't know, maybe 60-40.
And then the last
Depends on the
question, yeah, sure. The last question was, how do you charge for your services?
So we have an hourly rate, but I do an estimate. So I do a proposal. So I do an estimate for the scope of the project, so they know, and it's usually a range of hours. You're looking at, from here to here, and it's not. I can't tell you exactly because every project's different, but that gives them some idea of, you don't want to just go in blind and then all of a sudden they get these crazy invoices. And then we start with a retainer, work that off, and then after that we bill at the end of each month.
How many projects?
And that doesn't include the decorating budget and
That's just your
the
service.
renovation and the kitchen and all that stuff. That's just my services.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's say you're getting a brand new construction house in town. How long does that project take you? I call you today, you come over, we agree to work together.
If it's new construction, it can take a long time. It depends on when they bring me in. So we're getting ready to do our project on Kiowa, and it's really early stages. So they're still surveying the land, and the architect is going to be working on the plans. And so it's probably going to be like a 3-year project. Yeah, and we're getting ready to also do a new build. I'm in the middle of one right now in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, and it's a house we had done a few years ago, and then they tore it down, and now we've been in the process of doing another one, and they'll probably get in May, and that too has been probably 4 years if you include the research I did up front to get the architect and meet with them and all of that. But now we're getting ready to do another one in Ponte Vedra Beach. So in the early stages of talking to the architect, it's the same thing. It'll probably be like 3 years.
When you
so it depends on the project, but sometimes they've already, like that house we just did in Ohio, she had the architect. They were already starting the construction, like the renovation. They had the contractor, they had the landscape architect. I was the missing piece, and she couldn't find anybody that she liked. And then I think a friend of hers had mentioned me, and she'd been following me, and she called, and I was up there in like a week. So, and from the time that I went up there, we installed like 18 months later, 19 months later. So it's been like almost 2 years.
When you say something like a 3-year project, what gives me anxiety is me as the homeowner, not because you're going to do stuff that I won't still like in 3 years. My tastes change over 3 years. How do you, address that?
You don't design from the very beginning. So, and I'm not saying it's always going to be 3 years, but a new build, or maybe it depends on how fast they're going to go, and maybe it's 2 years. But if it's a renovation or just a decorating project, like Melanie's, I think we did. I'm trying to think of when we first started, when she called me. And I already knew Melanie a little bit when she had called me. But I think we installed around 11 or 12 months after maybe. But we didn't have to gut. Like we redid a fireplace and we replaced all of her countertops and painted the kitchen and we painted everything and plastered the walls. But we weren't in there like, gutting the place because the architecture, as you know, is amazing. But in terms of the taste changing, again, like I feel like when you're doing a home, it shouldn't be something that's trendy. But also the design is sort of fluid. So let's say from the very beginning, everybody's, they've brought the team together. The architect's designing. Well, the architect has to do the plans, which sometimes, in the beginning, sometimes I'll put together sort of, if we're reaching out and finding the architect, we'll have like an inspiration book or, a direction of things that we like. But so the architect has to do the plan, which that takes a long time. Then I come in and then the first thing I'm doing is sort of what I call the interior architecture. So what are the floors? What is the kitchen? What are the bathrooms? What is the wet bar? Like all of that. So that's the first part of designing a house like that. And then the second big one is the decorating and, the furniture and the rugs and all of that. So by the time you've done that, it's, a year and a half in or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then to get all these things ordered.
I know, it takes forever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even catalog stuff can take forever. But, if you're getting a custom sofa made or you're getting rugs made and they're coming from, India or wherever, it takes a long time. Yeah. Yeah. And workrooms are busy and
now I want to be rich.
Yeah.
And I want to hire you. And then when my taste changes in 2 or 3 years, I want you to come back and redo it all over again. Tear the house down and start over. Anyway, well, thank you so much. Do you have any more questions?
No.
Thank you for sharing all of this. Your story is amazing. And
so organic. I love that.
Yeah. So tell everybody how to find you.
So it's AngieHranowsky.com, and it's Angie Hranowsky on Instagram, which is HRANOWSKY. So you can go to my website or you can go to my Instagram.
There's so much to look at. It's really, your website's beautiful too. Did you do that since you're graphic design?
I didn't. So I used to do websites back in the day. I redid my website right before COVID is when I started. And at first, for a minute, I thought I can do this. And I was like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
I don't do graphic
Time
design
to delegate.
anymore. I can do all my own Christmas stuff. And, I can design and print my business card, like things like that. Like, I'm really glad that I have all of that graphic design branding knowledge. Like, even the way I put together my PDFs and my contracts are all really beautiful because I was a graphic designer. But doing my website, no. So I hired somebody to do that. Then COVID hit. So we sort of put everything on pause, which was great because the pause helped me to rethink everything. And I thought, oh, no, that's not actually what I want. But I was very specific about what I wanted. So, and then once I got him going, I realized I really needed to redo my brand in terms of my logo. And so that I thought I could do by myself. And I'd sit there for a couple weekends and I'm like, I'm not doing this. And so I called my friends, Courtney and Amy at Stitch. And I said, look, I know you guys, they're like me. Like they do the whole thing, A to Z. And I was like, this is not an A to Z. But I would love for you to do my logo and my mark, and so I hired them to do that. And again, I was very specific with my inspiration.
Well, it's beautiful,
but so I had a really great team, and I love our website. I'm really proud of it. Yeah, and I love Instagram. I love doing my Instagram. People are always like, I had somebody send me a message the other day, and they're like, it was a friend of mine, Haskell Harris, and she's an editor at Garden and Gun, and she was like, I feel like it's a history lesson all the time, and I was like, but it's just personal. I'm just doing what I love. I love to find out about all these things. So.
That's so cool.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for listening. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Check us out on @Between Two Brokers and @Smith Spencer Real Estate, and we will see you next time.